Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? It is August 2nd, Tuesday, August 2nd, 2016, in case you're keeping track of what year it is. I don't know why you would do that. Doesn't seem to make a difference. Good morning. We're ready to start the show. There are no stories, but we can talk about a bunch of other things anyway. Let's see. We have a morning tweet here. Oh, my God. All of a sudden, it just got buried in a massive number of annoying retweets of something I said 100 years ago. Stop talking about it, everybody. Daily Co's Radio is live now, says Bill in Portland, Maine. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, violently reveals that his pocket constitution also makes a great fly spotter. And it does. And I have a couple backups, plus some non-pocket versions, plus the original, which I stole in the feature film National Treasure. Perhaps you saw me. No? Okay. It was a Declaration of Independence, and it wasn't me. And I can't escape the movie. It's on every night somehow on HBO, so that's the only thing I see. If it's on HBO, I've seen that movie. Pretty much. Woo! That and anything on the Cartoon Network at this point. Topic of the morning, for whatever reason, sexual harassment, which was once pronounced, believe it or not, sexual harassment. I'm not sure where we got that one from, but you remember that it just seems like it was in the early days of discovering what it was. I remember when we invented the term. Of course, it has been around, I guess it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of the second or third oldest profession in the world, I suppose. Back in the Anita Hill days when they were popularizing the term. And it was a battle on American television over how to pronounce the thing. That wasn't the conscious battle people were having. But behind the scenes, it wasn't even behind the scenes, it was played out in front of the scenes, between the sexual harassment crowd and the sexual harassment crowd, who I suspect were influenced by English-speaking, English-type people, who I presume are the ones pronouncing it that way. Anyway, this morning, the discussion is about sexual harassment in the context of being a Trump. Donald Trump, I think, has a problem with a couple of things. One, being a sexual harasser himself. Two, understanding what it is. Three, understanding that he engages in it. And now, of course, his sons have a similar problem. And I think so does his daughter. Similar, related problem. I don't know that she's sexually harassing anybody. Not sure. I don't know that they're sexually harassing anybody. Of course, Donald Trump has made a habit of videotaping some of his sexual harassment. Some of the rest of it, I think, remains secret, of course, on private tapes that he may or may not currently retain. But, this morning, I guess, where's the chain of custody on this begin? They asked, I don't even know where it starts, but putting it all together, it's been a series of questions to Trump, Donald, the candidate, Trump Donald Jr., the son, Trump Eric, the son, about sexual harassment in the workplace. I guess it stems from the Roger Ailes suit, and of course Donald's continued defense of Roger Ailes as a great guy and someone who is helping these women, and that raises the issue of whether or not sexual harassment is something he would recognize or understand. I think not. I think generally speaking he's one of those guys, and there are many of them who think that their problem exists somewhere in the weird area in between, outright sexual harassment that they just don't acknowledge, and like men's rights sort of people, I don't know what, where it overlaps with Gamergate and men who think it's okay to tell women that they ought to smile more, and it's all right. I'm not sexually harassing you. To them, sexual harassment is I'm trying to rape you, as opposed to I'm trying to compliment you, either with the idea in mind that maybe you'll fall for me and then we'll have sex later, and it'll be consensual, even though we work together and I'm your boss or whatever, or I guess even outside of the context of of work where it's just, well, if I just compliment you a whole lot, then eventually I'm supposed to be able to expect sex from you and get it. And if I don't, then you're probably a lesbian or you're just a bitch or what. You know those guys, right? And they don't conceive of some of this stuff as sexual harassment. I'm sure that Donald doesn't think of a lot of what he does as sexual harassment, even though he's the kind of guy who does that strange brand of it where he just is constantly talking about how attractive you are and how he'd be dating you and how, but I'm not going to do that because I'm happily married, ha ha ha, but boy, wouldn't it be great, and et cetera, et cetera. And how come I keep returning to this theme, and why do I keep talking about how attractive you are, and maybe even specifically denote some of the things that make you so attractive, and perhaps their body parts. But don't worry about it. I'm just saying, I'm just complimenting you. What's wrong with compliment? You can't even compliment a woman anymore. This PC stuff has gone too far. That's the kind of guy we're talking about. And I guess his sons are the same sort of people, and I guess they asked Donald and then later the kids, what would you do, or what would be your feeling, what would be your reaction be if your daughter, Ivanka, who by all accounts is very attractive and you might even be dating her if it wasn't your daughter, what if she were subjected to the same sort of treatment that Roger Ailes subjected his employees and prospective employees to? And the answer was, well, they wouldn't. It wouldn't happen because she's too strong. Or Donald's answer was, I would encourage her, of course, to pursue a different career or find a new company to work in. In other words, if you're harassed, you got to leave. That's the old man's view of things. The sons just say, well, it wouldn't happen because she's so strong, which is also, I'm sure that they thought that was a really good pro-feminist response. She's a strong woman. Don't feminists want the whole strong woman thing? Okay, well, she's so strong, she wouldn't let it happen, which, denotes a couple of things. One, if you're sitting on a potentially billion-dollar inheritance, you can afford to do things like leave the companies you don't like or maybe not even work at all. And two, the other problem, of course, being, well, strong women don't get harassed, you see. Anyway, of course they do, and we have videotape of her being harassed, and being harassed by none other than her father. The clip that circulates, of course, if Ivanka wasn't my daughter, then perhaps I would be dating her. To which everybody chuckles and laughs, including Ivanka, who tosses her head and laughs. What's she going to do? She's sitting on $1 billion payday, right? It's her dad, and that's not supposed to be viewed as sexual harassment. But, of course, if Ivanka wasn't her daughter, perhaps that would be sexual harassment. It, of course, would be. You can't go on a television show and talk about someone's business acumen and say, by the way, ain't she a dumpling? But anyway, that's the Trump world for you. That's the way it works. In the meantime, he's losing, as it turns out, and I'll ask Greg Dworkin, how badly? How badly, Greg?
By between 7 and 9 points.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at a chart here, and it looks like it's almost tied.
Which chart?
The one you were complaining about on Twitter earlier.
That's the NBC SurveyMonkey poll, which actually went from a 1-point lead to an 8-point lead. But they do it on a y-axis of 0 to 100, so you need a microscope to really see how it's changed. The data viz fail, but a polling success.
True.
So, that's interesting. Let's go over the polls real quick. But I have to say before we get to that, Eric Trump also talked about the fact that he thought that the Donald Trump comments about the Khan family were overblown.
Oh, yeah?
To me, just like the size of Trump's hands, to me, like the size of Trump's wealth, also overblown. But, it's interesting that the Trump family continues to double down on this. And a quick piece from, of all places, the Wall Street Journal. To the go-along Republicans, memo to Paul Ryan, Trump's problem is his character, not his ideas. This is from Brett Stevens. And he goes along to the idea that, listen, if Clinton wins, don't worry, it's only 4 to 8 years. We can deal with it. And then he goes on to say, but to say there are no permanent victories or defeats in politics doesn't mean there's no permanent dishonor. Huey Long, Charles Coughlin, Father Coughlin, Alger Hiss, Joe McCarthy, Bull Connor are the foul names of America's 20th century and always will be. And those who supported and excused them will always be tainted by association. This is where Republicans now find themselves with the presidential nominee. Of all the Donald Trump vile eruptions about Senator McCain's military record, reporter Serge Kovalevsky's physical handicap, or Judge Gonzalo Curiel's judicial fitness, his casual smear of Ghazala Khan is perhaps the vilest. And this isn't simply because Mrs. Khan is a bereaved mother, he writes. Bereavement alone does not place someone above criticism, especially when it comes to political differences. Although, I have to interject, it does make you pause and at least think about what you're saying. This happens all the time when I tell people I'm from Newtown. That doesn't give me the moral right to talk about it as if nobody else is allowed. But understand where we're coming from, and that's the point of bringing it up. Back to him, nor is it because Mrs. Khan's son, U.S. Army Captain Homian Khan, died heroically to protect his troops in Iraq. The special deference given to Gold Star parents is at bottom a social convention. No, what makes Mr. Trump's remarks so foul is their undisguised sadism. He took a woman too heartbroken and anxious to speak of her dead son before an audience of millions and painted a target on her. He treated her silence as evidence that she was either a dolt or a stooge. He degraded her. She was standing there. She had nothing to say, Mr. Trump told ABC's George Stephanopoulos. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say. You tell me. In this comment, there was the full unmasking of Mr. Trump in case he needed further unmasking. He has, as Humayun's father, Keyser, put it, a black soul. Black souls matter. His problem isn't the lack of normal propriety, but the absence of basic human decency. He is morally unfit for any office, high or low. This is the point that needs to dawn, and dawn soon, on Republican office holders who pretend to endorse Mr. Trump while also pretending via wink and nod that they do not. And he goes along and talks about Paul Ryan in this regard. And, of course, let's not leave out Mitch McConnell. It's funny, nobody mentions McConnell because nobody expects better from McConnell. For some reason, people expect better from Paul Ryan. Goodness knows why. His own budget is actually pretty heartless. But for whatever reason, Paul Ryan comes across as one of these sincere fellows who shouldn't be doing this. And, in fact, of course, he is. Now, Bret Stephens is not the only one to point this out. Stu Rothenberg has a column in the Washington Post today where he now writes, whatever Trump's personal weakness, and the list is long, he is in the process of undermining the entire rationale for the Republican Party. Trump's Republican Party echoes the economic populism of the Democratic Party. Remember, Stu leans Republican when I say this. It ignores the party's traditional cultural values and now has turned its back on the GOP's foreign policy worldview. Indeed, Trump's view of Putin and how countries should get along shows the kind of naivete normally associated with the most liberal of Democrats. Thank you, Stu. Even worse, Trump's message is not about the limits of political power. It's about the unlimited nature of his own power and abilities. All of this raises a question of whether Republican office holders and party leaders who announced their support for Trump will now reverse themselves and pull their endorsements. Though McCain of Arizona has come close, it's very difficult to believe many will take that dramatic step. Like Ryan and McConnell, at least he doesn't forget McConnell, most will criticize a Trump statement or otherwise indicate a different point of view, but pulling an endorsement is a much bigger step. And then talks about how we're so incredibly tribal, it's just not going to happen. But here's a retiring guy, and when you retire, you get to do stuff. GOP Representative Richard Hanna, which is, I think, New York 22, I'll vote for Clinton. First House member to cross party line. When you retire, you get to do stuff.
Yes.
And the fun part is the actual letter that he sent describing
Z.
this.
Was that the one?
What's that?
Is that the letter? I'm going to guess it's Z.
It's his favorite letter. No, actually, D for devil.
Oh. All right.
Months ago, I publicly said I could not support Trump. My reasons were simple and personal. I found him profoundly offensive and narcissistic, but as much of anything a world-class panderer, anything but a leader. This is his own party talking about him. Little more than a changing mirror of those he speaks to. I never expect to agree with whoever's president, but at a minimum, the president needs to consistently display those qualities I have preached to my two children: kindness, honesty, dignity, compassion, and respect.
Oops. Oh, well.
I do not expect perfection, but I do require more than the embodiment of at least the short list of the 7 deadly sins.
Okay.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Nicely done. So you're a no, then, Richard.
So he's a no.
Right, okay.
Anyway, back to polling. So
Yes.
we have that 47 to 41 general Huffington Post lead. We have the 7-point jump in the NBC SurveyMonkey, even the bizarre and week-long USC LA Times poll is starting to come into line. It a week ago had a 7-point lead for Trump. Now it's down to 2, 45-43, which is about where it's running all along. So for whatever reason, that's an R-leaning poll. We have YouGov from yesterday. Clinton picks up 1 and Trump drops 2, so it's now 41-36, a 5-point lead in the one that includes Gary Johnson at 8 and Jill Stein at 4.
Really?
So we have a number of polls, and one of the big polls that we have, one before we get to the CNN poll, which shows a 9-point lead for Clinton and a big 12-point swing. Philip Bump has this nice piece here in the Washington Post today. More people watched Donald Trump's convention speech than Hillary Clinton's and hated it.
Yes.
And talks about that, not just the impressions of the RNC versus DNC that we talked about yesterday, where the RNC had the first negative reaction to a 4-day commercial that Gallup has ever measured.
Oh.
But Hillary's speech ranks just about where Obama's did last year.
Oh.
And, more excellent good versus poor terrible. So you take the excellent goods and then you subtract out of it the poor terribles and you see what you get. So she's got a 2021 and Obama had like a 28. And his Obama's speech in 2008 was really well received. That kind of sets a standard. That's a plus 50.
Oh, wow.
And it looks like Donald Trump was in negative territory.
Yeah. That's what they say. Mark wrote it up or just before the weekend, I think. That was the worst
Worst
Gallup
speech
had
ever.
ever
That is
measured.
correct. So anyway, with that background, CNN comes out and says that, this keys in the CNN poll that Nate Cohn pointed out. Clinton's at 91% with Sanders voters.
Okay.
82% among non-white voters. Up 65-32 among voters under age 45.
Okay.
She's up 10 points with white college and more education.
Okay, because there's a lot of that.
Yeah, so she loses with the white working class voters who don't have a college degree. But it's still pretty interesting. She's still weak with white working class voters in the CNN poll. Trump is up 60-34, which is a little bit better than Romney in 2012, but not nearly enough.
Well, too bad for him.
So in this definition, white working class voters is white without a college degree.
Yeah,
it's an approximation of where you're at, and that's
Bill
what they
Gates.
asked. But, still overall doing very, very well. And then we have some state polls that come out, and there's a bunch of state polls this morning that are really odd. For example, Clinton's up 1 point in Utah. There was a Georgia poll yesterday showing tied. And Bill Clinton is actually going to Utah to stump.
Okay.
So the odd, he's going there on August 11th. So whereas Trump is talking about how he has to win Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida, the traditional swing states.
Yes.
And he talks about expanding the map. In fact, the map has, for him, closed to Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania.
So expanding into new areas.
Yeah, whereas it's Clinton that's playing with Georgia, maybe Arizona, and Utah.
That is amazing.
So that gives you an idea of where the race is at.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump is not going to win, bottom line. And so, it's only summer. I hear some dumb stuff being said. It's only summer. The polls don't count. We're now less than 100 days before the election. And this is when the polls start to get real short. Give it another week to stabilize. Yes, you can wait until after Labor Day when people really key in to start paying attention. That's for the undecideds. But, a lot of people have already made up their mind and are locked in. And it's likely that, Clinton's going to wind up in a week or so showing a 5 to 6 point lead. And that may well stay for a while, at least until the purported debates that may or may not happen.
Right. This sort of feels like one of those elections where people are going to lock into their positions early.
Yeah, because they know who they are. This is not like I need to find out more about this guy. Somebody was writing about the fact that in some elections, The day before the election, everybody Googles their local paper to see who they endorse. But, right? A lot of that is for down ticket and for ballot initiatives.
Yeah,
so don't be fooled by that.
Well, okay. I mean, I won't let it fool me too much.
Yeah, not that anybody pays attention to newspaper endorsements. I think you're right. I think in this case, everybody knows who these people are.
Yeah, for presidential, I don't think. I think it's a good point. If they're Googling, it's because, well, what else do I have to do tomorrow?
Yep. Anyway, here's a fun poll that won't get talked about a lot, but it's still a fun poll. And this is a statewide survey of Louisiana likely voters on David Duke. University of New Orleans Survey Research Center sponsored an automated interactive voice response IBR RoboPoll telephone survey of likely Louisiana voters on July 27, 28, 2016. And guess what? Everybody hates David Duke. This is reassuring.
Dang.
Total favorability ratings of Duke. You think Trump's are bad? Duke has yes 14, no 82.
Oh.
And just to make you feel better about America.
I like America. Okay. Yes.
Whites. Yes 14, no 82 to David Duke. Blacks 16, no 81.
16.
Yeah. According to this poll, David Duke has a better favorability with blacks than he does with whites. It's in the margin of error.
Okay, I guess that's true too.
The point is everybody hates him.
Still 16. Yeah, I guess there might be black voters who say, yeah, you know what? I mean, when you're asking me the question of when you bring up David Duke and separatism, I start to get sympathetic.
Yeah. Not only that, I like him. He's the only honest guy.
Oh, maybe. True. Yeah, I know exactly what to do with this guy.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Everybody else lies about it, but he's right up straight front about it,
Yeah, maybe. I guess. And then, well, all right.
Who knows? They don't ask why.
I don't.
Males, 13 say yes for favorability and 84 say no. Females, 15% say yes and 80 says no. Across the board, 13 yes, 84 no. Democrats, Republicans, 16 yes, 80 no. Independent, other party, 13 yes, no, 82. Remarkably consistent. It doesn't matter who you are. You hate David Duke.
All right. Maybe including David Duke.
Yeah, who knows? So that was somewhat reassuring, and we'd like to see that.
Well, that's good. And they should ask down in Louisiana what they think of the Wall Street Journal throwing Huey Long in there with Father Coughlin.
They're the same, right?
I was like, well, at least you told us Wall Street Journal. Like, the Wall Street Journal bell just went off. Well, there's Hitler and...
Lucifer, and Huey Long.
Okay, I see.
Right.
Well, all right. Good on you, Louisiana.
It reminds me of what Senator Graham used to say about Ted Cruz, a variation of the joke.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly who he used. It was something along the lines of, if Hitler, Stalin, and Ted Cruz were in the room and you only had 2 bullets, who would you shoot? And the answer is Ted Cruz twice.
Yeah, probably. You got to be sure.
Look, it's his joke, but just to give you an idea of why Ted Cruz was not able to get a sufficient second in this nomination process.
There you go.
Anyway,
yes.
What else do we have?
Mm-hmm.
Not only do we have the Republican retiree get out of the race for Trump and endorse Clinton, but here's another one. This is top Jeb Bush advisor leaves GOP, will vote for Clinton if Florida is close. And this is Sally Bradshaw. She's now an independent and says if the presidential race in Florida is close, she'll vote for Clinton.
Okay.
It's very close to Jeb Bush. He was part of the Republican autopsy that was completely rejected by the party. She says this election cycle is a test. As much as I don't want another 4 years of President Barack Obama's policies, I can't look my children in the eye and tell them I voted for Donald Trump. I can't tell them to love their neighbor and treat others the way they wanted to be treated and vote for Trump. I won't do it.
Yeah. Well, she's right.
And then what does she mention?
Damn it.
She mentions the Khan family.
Oh.
Right? This Wrath of Khan thing is going to be a big deal. Donald Trump belittled a woman who gave birth to a son who died fighting for the United States. If anything, that reinforced my decision to become an independent voter. Every family who loses a loved one in service to our country, who has a family member who serves in the military, should be honored regardless of the political views and so on and so forth. The latest incident reinforced how she was feeling about the decision she's long weighed. Now we have in the Atlantic magazine Connor Friedersdorf, who is a libertarian Why Khizr Khan is Paul Ryan's worst nightmare, and I actually penciled in crayon there, and Marco Rubio's.
Oh, yeah, him too.
The father of a fallen U.S. soldier is drawing attention to the fact that the Republican leadership cares more about partisan victory than repudiating prejudice. Now, that's what Stu Rothenberg was getting at when he said nobody's going to back off. And, of course, you had called this a long time ago when you pointed out that no matter what kind of Paul Ryan waffling, he's ultimately going to wind up endorsing Trump, which is exactly what happened. But there's complicated things out there. The email stuff with Clinton is complicated. There's nuance. Sure, you can reduce it to character lying if you want to, but the fact is everybody understands it's a really complicated situation that has a lot to do with interagency arguing about what's the definition of classified.
Yeah, that's true.
The Khizr Khan situation is crystal clear. There is only one response, and that's thank you for your service.
What about the granite countertops or other similar accusations?
Well, trying to make him into a villain, a secret Muslim, yes, and some of the other stuff that's been coming out yesterday from Trump surrogates.
Secret terrorist, they're going that far. I mean,
secret terror. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible and totally counterproductive, not working. Even if it's only lip service, Republicans everywhere are rallying around the Khan family and not Trump. There's a story that Trump asked Congress, Republicans in Congress, to back him on attacking the Khan family. And the Republican Congress, Senate and representatives on the Republican side, their response was to leak the email rather than have a single person back Trump up.
All right. Well, that's an excellent leak, by the way, because, of course, you never know whether someone might in fact take up the invitation, and now they won't because oh my God,
exactly. So it just gives you an idea the whole thing is playing out. And of course Trump took a 1 or 2 day story and he made it into a week-long story because he can't give up on this, which tells you everything you need to know about his character.
Well,
that's why Khizr Khan is Paul Ryan's worst nightmare, because we know that people are tribal, and we know that, and Hugh Hewitt is a perfect example of this. For some reason that I cannot fathom, they have him on MSNBC as an analyst. I don't know why, but they do. So what does he say? I don't care about anything Trump does. There's nothing he says that can make me not back him. It's all about the Supreme Court. We need those slots. And if Hillary Clinton wins, he says, then conservatism will be set back for a generation. Therefore, there is nothing Trump can say or do that won't, make me vote for him. I will vote for him regardless. I need those slots.
It's all right. You can nail that down. I don't think you need to wear it around your neck, Hugh, because what it means when he loses is Donald Trump killed conservatism and your hope of ever having the kind of America you want. You should blame him accordingly. I think maybe tar and feather would be a good idea. After the election, of course, when he's no longer entitled to Secret Service protection. But just realize that the flip side of what you're saying is this guy is responsible for the life or death of conservatism, and you, as a supposed conservative leader, put your trust in him to do that. That's going to be on you.
That's exactly right. And now take out Hugh Hewitt's name and put in Paul Ryan's, and you got the situation.
Awesome. You guys are terrible. I'm happy that you're terrible. I root for terrible conservatives.
Yeah, meanwhile, here's a piece from Politico. Democrats make a play to turn Arizona blue. We already talked about Utah. And there's a nice piece in the New Yorker about Arizona recruitment for Latinos. So there's a lot happening beyond the headlines. And, part of the big picture, of course, is that regardless of the polls, which happen to be favoring Clinton right now, with some truly bizarre swings in the 538 projections, going from Trump has a 55% chance of winning to Clinton has an 89% chance of winning a day later.
Yeah.
That's their nowcast. That's why I don't pay attention to it. But on the whole, most of the prediction sites are similar. I think Clinton's up to 74 or 73% from 70 in some of them. Nonetheless, the bigger picture beyond the polls is the fact that when you look at the map, as we talked about, Clinton's expanding it. Trump is shrinking it to 3 states now. And Clinton raised nearly $90 million if you include all the fringe stuff, including party numbers, and Trump pulled in 33 million last month, which is the same month that I think Romney did 101 million.
Oh, yes, along with the comment that it was unprecedented for Republicans.
True. What he meant was to have something as small.
Right. Yeah, well, there's only so much he can fit in his hands.
Now, two other things before I scoot off. One is, for a change, something positive about Clinton. Everything's always negative Trump and, how Hillary owes everything to Bernie. And that may or may not be true, But here's a piece by Anna Greenberg, Stan Greenberg's daughter, vice president of Greenberg Quinlan Rosner Research, a Democratic polling firm. Why Hillary Clinton is both widely disliked and widely admired.
Okay.
And the bottom line here, Hillary Clinton's the most admired woman in the United States, but she's also viewed unfavorably by nearly 60% of Americans. And somehow both are true at the same time.
Okay.
How can that be?
I don't know.
Well, the answer says a lot about women who break glass ceilings.
There we go.
If you do something which is unprecedented, and this happened to her when she was first lady and took an activist role. Same thing happened to Eleanor Roosevelt. You're going to have people who hate you because you're not hewing to the traditional role.
Right.
People may admire you for that, but you're still going to pay a price.
Okay, I can believe that. I guess there are certainly people that I say, well, I admire this or that aspect of what they do, but on the whole, I'd rather have someone else. If you're asking me, do you want this person to be your president or babysit your kids or anything like that?
Right. Looking at the fluctuations in Clinton's favorability over time, she writes, it seems clear that she suffers the backlash that occurs when a woman breaks gender role barriers. When she follows traditional roles, say being the supportive wife or loyally serving President Obama as Secretary of State after she lost to him in 2008, her favorability rises. When she defies traditional gender roles, taking on healthcare reform as First Lady, running for Senate, running for President, her favorability declines. People admire her for shattering tradition, but they don't necessarily like her for it.
Okay.
And then goes on to point out, women who break barriers are rarely popular. To quote feminist historian Laura Thatcher Ulrich, well-behaved women seldom make history.
Yes, true.
Even today, people are ambivalent about feminism and feminists, but ultimately the women who break those barriers are admired for the same things people like about Clinton, their grit, tenacity, and indeed their willingness to be unpopular and unconventional. In focus groups I conduct across the country, many swing voters are ambivalent about Clinton. Voters talk about her resilience and tenacity. They know she has experienced trials and tribulations unlike any other woman in public life, yet she not only lands on her feet but excels in her new professional challenges. Older women especially see a woman who managed to keep her family intact under hideous personal scrutiny while making an amazing transition from First Lady to Secretary of State, and now the first woman to be nominated for president by a major party, and I would add, and going to be elected too. At the same time, they feel as if they do not know her deeply, and they wonder about her motives. They do not know what makes her tick, because many do not connect with a woman who defies norms the way she has. Clinton herself acknowledged that Thursday night. I get some people don't know what to make of me. Indeed, in research for other female candidates, I've heard some people express skepticism about women who have made different life choices than they have, particularly pursuing career over family. They just do not relate to a woman in a suit with a plan. In this context, Clinton Foundation donations and private email servers compound the notion she's inscrutable and untrustworthy. This anecdotal evidence is supported by polling, which shows decisively that her experience and steadiness are her most important attributes and the most important contrast with Trump, while honesty and trustworthiness are her biggest vulnerabilities. And then they talk about her history, what she did in Arkansas. If Clinton wins in November, it's a sure bet she'll be the most admired woman by a large margin. Whether Americans come to have a favorable view of her may say less about her than about us and our ability to accept her as a gender role iconoclast.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective.
Right. I mean, maybe we just have a problem admiring women. Another thing.
Who win? Donald Trump does.
In the sense of admiring actual accomplishments as opposed to, hey, I'm admiring that woman over there.
All right. And my final set today is a really interesting dialogue with Ross Douthat, which started with one of his Sunday columns, which wasn't all that good. I think we may even have talked about it, but got better when he hit Twitter. His column is called Liberalism's Big Bet.
I don't like it. All right.
Well, it was the whole idea
They're
that
already
the
going.
Republican convention was a disaster.
It was.
And the Democratic convention was great, except for the last day when Clinton opened her mouth.
Oh. Well, I don't know.
And the idea was that the Democrats stole everything the Republicans love: patriotism and country service, loving the Constitution with Mr. Kahn's speech, and dumping on Donald Trump, which everybody's fine with.
Mm-hmm.
But then Clinton was really left, not right, with her speech in terms of what she stands for. Guess what? She's a Democrat. But, basically social issues. And he writes,
but okay.
Imagine, for instance, you're one of the many church-going voters, Catholic, evangelical, and Mormon, repelled by Trump's vulgarian style, his bigotry, his misogyny, his embodiment of an essentially post-religious right. You generally vote Republican because of issues like abortion, but Trump's bluster about Supreme Court justices hasn't convinced you that he's worth the risk. But on social issues, Clinton and her party aren't even offering the fig leaf of her husband's safe, legal, and rare formulation. They're for abortion rights without exception, for public funding of abortion, a maximalist stance that thrills pro-choice activists, but is nowhere near the muddled middle on the issue. So, any pro-lifer inclined to cast a vote for Hillary has no cover. To stop Trump, they have to cast a baldly pro-abortion vote. Then he talks about immigration policy, same thing. And then finally, you're a fiscal conservative who appreciated Bill Clinton's balanced budgets. Trump to you looks like a big government populist, not a budget cutter. So a fiscally sober Democrat would obviously represent the better choice, but you listen to Hillary's acceptance speech and you heard the voice of Bernie Sanders. Expand Social Security, free college, new infrastructure, plus a call for a living wage and a jab in unfair trade deals. There wasn't even a nod to entitlement reform of the deficit, no mention of cost of excessive regulation or the virtues of free trade, no real hint to how this largesse might be paid for. It was great society liberalism come round again, saner than Trumpism, but to your ears, ideologically similar at bottom.
Well, he means to his ears, but okay.
So the bet may pay off big for liberalism, but for now, as a response to the Trump emergency, it's still just that, a bet. And he's talking about how difficult it is for somebody like him who can't stand Trump to vote for her. But he follows it up with a really nice tweet storm that kind of explains where he's coming from and goes like this. Judging from some responses from liberal friends to my Sunday column, it's worth following up with a quick thought. There's growing sense among liberals now, it's simply obvious that anti-Trump conservatives should and indeed must support Hillary Clinton. And I would add, this is true.
Okay.
There are plausible arguments that they're right, he says. Well, thank you. But I think liberals could profit from imagining how they themselves would react were the shoe on the other foot. That is, imagine a Trump of the left as the Democratic nominee. This is, of course, where he fails because there is no Trump on the left. But let's follow through the logic here. Some amalgam of Sharpton, Jeffrey Epstein, Jill Stein. Yes, hard to come up with, but try. Imagine a clearly unfit Dem nominee. I don't know. Alan Grayson? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, you don't want to support them.
Okay.
But the Republican nominee is Rick Santorum. That wasn't a problem for me. If it's Trump versus Santorum, I vote for Santorum.
Yeah.
Hate him, but that's not a question. Wait, you say. Santorum is an extremist kook himself. Hillary is totally sensible. Again, use your imagination here. Well, you have to because, follow the logic a little bit more. Most of Santorum's views, save for his zeal, were fairly mainstream 10 years ago. His views on economics closer to center than many GOP. Hillary's running to the left of where Dems were 10 years ago, well to the left of her husband's administration, plus all the Clinton baggage, plus she's an avatar of the 60s culture war in a way that even Obama isn't, and her shift back leftward on abortion has cemented that. As far as being an avatar of the 60s culture war, she's a woman doing a man's job.
Right.
Yes, you can come up with other reasons, experience, etc., why this Santorum comparison doesn't work. And it really doesn't. But it was only a few months ago smart liberals were arguing Trump would be better than Cruz or Rubio for the same reasons liberals would be horrified at Santorum. I myself was not in that camp. Remember, I made the case why Cruz would be better, thanks to my friend Erica Grider in Texas who's following him. And it's that level of ideological horror that liberals need to recognize that many conservatives feel about the idea of a Hillary vote. This is where I think he gets to something that would be worth thinking about.
All right.
It's not going to change our mind. We're not there, but at least in trying to understand the minds of the never-Trumpers. Finally, as I said in the column, I'm not angrily blaming liberals for this situation. The right and the GOP did this to itself. But in their quest to woo conservatives into a popular front, liberals just need to recognize the scale of the ask. And I think he's right. For a lot of these folks, it's just you add the tribal to the guns and abortion, which is what they're normally voting on.
Yeah.
And then say vote for Clinton. That is hard for them to do.
Yes. I'm sure that's hard.
I would argue country over party, and you got to do it anyway. But we at least have to respect and understand that it's a difficult thing for them to actually pull that lever, push that button, make that X on the piece of paper with optical scanning, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I think that I'll take that part of it. Okay, it's difficult for them to come around to doing it. I don't need you
just
to do it.
But at least I will give you this. I respect the fact that it's difficult.
Yeah.
Now,
I will acknowledge that it's difficult. I don't respect the fact
I respect the fact that it's difficult.
I won't even do that. I'll respect the fact that you think it's difficult. I mean, that is to say, I understand that you feel it's difficult. I don't really respect how difficult it is for you, but that's okay. You don't need my respect. I also don't need your vote. Basically, I'm just saying, if it's tough for you to come around to the position that you need to take in order to not want to kill yourself after the election, golly, that's sad to hear. Good luck. I don't need you. But
I think it's fair to say we're coming at this from a different perspective than, let's say, Dowd. For us, it's not really difficult at all. But if we turn to the Never Trumpers that we've been following all this time, then it's a if you're going to be an anthropologist and sort of look at these folks as if they're under a tiny and you've got the looking glass or the magnifying glass and trying to look at these folks, it's worth trying to get into their head a little bit and see where they're coming from. So. Okay. I'll give you space. You got another week.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. All right. So there are conservatives who want us to know that they're really going to have to
They're troubled.
There you go. Here's a little pat for you.
I mean, is that not the perfect analogy?
Right. I'm deeply troubled by
exactly.
it. Okay,
fine. What are you going to do?
Yeah. I know. That's the favorite exercise.
She's exactly in that situation.
Yeah. I guess favorite exercise of conservatives who have to survive at New York Times and elsewhere in writing their columns to show how troubled they are for having to figure out a way that they can abandon the Republicans and not vote Trump. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll have a bowl of lollipops out for them. You did it.
So
Yay.
Mike Maskey takes this on. He's got a nice column here about that very thing. The impossibility of a leftist Trump.
That's okay. Good.
Okay, and goes into this here. He points out that Tim Kaine and the selection of Tim Kaine tells us more about what kind of president she'll be than the platform. So Dowd is obsessing about the platform. Who cares about the platform?
That's a good point.
Her selection of Tim Kaine and her own history tell us more about what kind of president she'll be. I find Kaine admirable. It's much harder to be pretty liberal in Virginia than it is to be a perfect lefty in Vermont. To choose a state name out of a hat. I find Clinton too cautious and have said so dozens of times, but for better or worse, her history and nature are surer guides to how she'll govern than the platform is. I would also expect that she and Kaine will make the overtures Dowd is asking for. Maybe not those exact ones, but one or two general election audience signals that she wants some center-right votes. If Trump is going to cede that space by offending everybody in sight, she'd be foolish not to try and take it. And the fact of the matter is, Tim Kaine is a devout Catholic, like Dowd, who personally opposes abortion, like Dowd, but who happens, like Joe Biden and many other people who find themselves in that position as Democrats, who will go along with the party and the country in regard to my own personal feelings and not the same thing as what I would legislate. Unlike, let's say, the social conservatives in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So if you want to find somebody sympathetic, you already have somebody who's sympathetic. It's not like, they can't understand the dilemma. And so Tomasky goes on to write, I feel for conservative pundits and thinkers to some extent. I really do. I've wondered many times what I would do if the situation were reversed. But here's the thing. The situation isn't reversed, and it would never be reversed. The idea that the Democrats would nominate Sean Penn or Alan Grayson, who probably isn't even going to win his primary, or Charlie Sheen or Susan Sarandon or whoever is totally insane. Mm-hmm. Democrats have cantered a bit on the left, but the Republicans have galloped to the right like Secretariat on crack. And over these past 8 years of birther conspiracies and racially coded barbs at the moocher class president, they've led their voters to the point where those voters thought voting for Donald Trump was a sensible and defensible thing. If I were on the right, I'd spend a lot more time examining why that happened than I would in analyzing Hillary's imperfections.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad that that's there, because that's the essential answer to this. I guess I'll even boil it down further. The reason this won't happen on the liberal side is nominating people who, on relatively objective, and that's always a difficult term, but a relatively objective examination, prove to be the kind of person stable enough to recognize that the institutions of government are, generally speaking, in the broadest strokes, well-designed and deserving of preservation. That's what liberalism is. Liberalism isn't, boy, everybody should go get abortions and give away free money. Those are perhaps positions that, for other reasons, you may come to because you're liberal. But the classic liberalism is, hey, what's the situation here? What are our problems? What are our solutions? What works? What doesn't work? Let's do that. Whereas, I mean, one, that doesn't really even obtain in conservatism, and two, it's, like I said, it's the reason you won't find anyone saying, as liberals, let's nominate someone completely illiberal, but, socially liberal, that is, or that takes positions classically aligned with some liberals, but for completely different reasons. It doesn't meet the definition of liberalism.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I mean, you can think about it deeply, which I like to do, and come to the very same conclusion that if you didn't think about it for more than a few seconds. But nonetheless, that argument is out there. I thought it was a well-crafted series of tweets, at least, better than the article. And there you have it. So, bottom line is, Clinton is winning this election, Trump is losing, and every day he gives us more reason to think that there's going to be yet another different reason for why he's going to lose. And the reckoning for Republicans who support him and have him as an albatross and millstone around their neck still has yet to happen. And that looks going to be quite interesting when, in fact, it does.
I guess so. Poor Ross. He's having difficulty
deciding
poor Ross,
not to poor stick Paul his hand in
Ryan. Disposal. Yeah, and that's a good connection to make, too, at the end, just to remind him that, whatever difficulty Ross may have in voting for, or concluding that he should vote for Hillary Clinton, or whatever the hell he's going to do with himself. Recall that Paul Ryan and Hugh Hewitt and others are essentially saying, I'm out, Ross. If you think he's going to lose, and you think he's going to lose for the reasons you think he ought to lose, I'm out to destroy your hope of ever having a conservative worth voting for again. See if you can stop me.
I'm going to risk it all in the vain hope that we get to keep the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And Ross is like, oh, what should I do? I'm so dedicated to conservatism, but I guess maybe I should destroy it. Whatever, I don't know.
Well, there's people who have left the party who say no.
Yeah.
And so, again, I said at the very beginning of all of this, months and months and months ago, the purpose and function of Never Trump has nothing to do with stopping him at the convention. You can't do that. If the voters want him, and the problem there with Trump isn't the problem of Trump, it's the problem of his base wanting somebody like Trump.
Yeah.
So if, Never Trumpers are not about stopping him at the convention. That wasn't going to happen. The question is what happens afterwards. And now we see that some of them are sticking to their guns and leaving the party and becoming independents. And that's fine. And, that's really where that movement was going. And they write about it. Now, granted, the Trump base doesn't care. The Trump base is a cult. Yeah. You can't say anything against Trump because they'll assume you're lying, that you're the liberal media, that you're this, you're that, you're anything else. And that doesn't matter in the sense of how the election goes because it's only about 40% of the population. In all of these polls, Trump is really having a lot of trouble breaking 45. His numbers run from anywhere from 38 to 42. And you know what? That may well be where he finishes. Who knows? At the same time, the base wants it. And the problem with Trump is his base, not just Trump himself. And to not recognize that is to miss the whole story of what's going on with this election. Matt Dowd tweeted, isn't it amazing? Really, the story is that despite everything, Hillary's only up by 6. And I said, no, the problem and the story is that Trump's base wants it that way. Yeah. And he said, stop being so partisan. And I said, you got to put country over party here, my friend. And, right now you're in this Ron Fournier, Matthew Dowd world of the duopoly is bad and we need a third party. And when you do that, you completely miss the story of what's going on with those parties. Trump is an existential issue, and Republicans really need to understand that they can't be voting for him. And whether you get there with difficulty the way Douthat does, or you would get there with ease in terms of the retiring Republican Representative Hanna from New York, or the ex-Jeb Bush official in Florida who says she'll vote for Clinton if that's what it takes to win Florida, you got to get there. And no excuses.
Okay.
You can take your time, but in the end, do the right thing. And with that, I'm going to leave you. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning. I know a lot to cover, but hey, there's a lot happening. It's not my fault. I just look at what's in the news.
Okay. I can believe that.
All right, I'm off the hook.
He publishes in a large newspaper. I suppose we have to look at that.
Yep. Anyway, take care, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks very much, Greg.
Take care.
We will.
Bye.
Okay, you do the same. And, okay. Well, it's an exemplar of what's going on out there. There's that. He did publish that article. That's about the best I can say for that one. And, I mean, I guess the kernel that I can take away with this is I understand that there are people having difficulty. I don't understand the difficulty myself, but I understand that it's true that they say they're having difficulty. That's it. That's all I can rescue. I guess now I would say, all right, here, we'll put this in some other context too. Okay, learning from Barack Obama's speeches and legacy. If the job of getting the votes to get the stuff done is to sit around and say, boy, I sympathize with the Ross Doudhats of the world, and golly, I'll if I am seen publicly expressing understanding and sympathy, and it results in the votes, and then we kick major ass and get the stuff we want done, maybe I take the ding. If it's garbage, then it's a risk to take. I have to sit out there. There are going to be people who will say, why are you even indulging this nonsense? You know he's wrong. Yeah, I know that he's wrong. The question here is, do I say, what do I think is the outcome of this play? If I say, golly gee whiz, I feel so bad for you, I'm very understanding. Well, let's see. Who wins? Who do I win with that? There could be liberals who say it's good to open your mind to the possibility that, that Ross Douthat isn't the complete idiot and isn't just attention seeking here. But, okay, so it's kind of you to go out of your way to acknowledge the difficulty that he's having. And maybe that will welcome him, make him feel welcome, and he'll cross over and he'll do the right thing and will feel good about having done it, and it's good all around. Of course, then I also have to wonder, okay, well, what percentage of my own base will say, don't coddle this idiot, you're right, he's wrong, just say, look, do what you got to do, man, but get on board or have this guy around your neck when we hang you afterwards. Okay, well, there will be some people who are supercharged by that, and then there will be some others who would say, no, we really need to be more tolerant. Okay, so where does the mass of the votes lie? Do I really lose people? Can I really lose the dedicated liberals who would prefer that I express sympathy if I simply just say, whatever, man, do what you got to do, deal with your own problems. This is a nonsense column. I don't know if they walk away. They say, I wish he had handled that more gently. But honestly, he's still. We're all in the right place here. So maybe the play is to be a little more hard-lined. But I don't know that Obama is that kind of guy. He hasn't gotten where he's gotten by being that way. I don't suppose you lose anybody either way. And so maybe the play here is don't do anything with it. Don't obsess over it. Get back to your own game. Execute the plan that you need to execute in order to maximize your votes and win. And the easiest way to put the Ross Downhat dilemma behind you is to say, okay, you want me to acknowledge that, acknowledged, and walking on. And, of course, you'll get that backwards looking, well, why did you acknowledge that? You should have stood up and fought. You know what? Why? How much time should I spend pointing out he's wrong? He's wrong. You know he's wrong. I know he's wrong. He knows he's wrong. I'll play this game. Oh, pat, it's tough for you, etc. Oh, should I imagine the possibility of a liberal Donald Trump? I don't really think that's necessary or perhaps even possible within the definition of what liberalism is, and I think you misunderstand it, and I think I don't. But why head down that road? Yeah, here's me being understanding to you. Is that what it takes? All right, I'll take the knock for being too understanding for you. Man, maybe that's what we can do. I mean, strategically speaking, which one helps us move on? That one? I think so. Perhaps we'll take that. Okay, let's see. What other fun things have we got? I'm looking up and down the list of things that Greg sent. Was there anything we didn't get to that we really ought to? Let's see. I think it was pretty well covered up and down the line here, which is that's an unusual accomplishment. Usually there's 2 or 3 things that Greg includes and then holds in his pocket for the next day as the segment winds down. But I think we really pretty much hit it all here today. So well done. Though I see we stretched it out to almost 10 o'clock, so I suppose you should be able to do that within an hour. I can't when it's just me, but you know how I get into things. Okay, let's see. Things I have put aside for today, things we can skip back to. Let's dive in and see what we've got to sample from here. Let's see. Here is a follow-up to Ari Berman's piece yesterday. You'll never believe who wrote it. Ari Berman. That's what makes it a follow-up to his piece. But recall that I had mentioned, or we spent a long time discussing the North Carolina cases, or the voting rights case yesterday, with a brief mention that Wisconsin likewise was seeing a lot of its voter access restriction laws struck down by the courts. It's a trend now. 5 major GOP voting restrictions have been blocked in 10 days. Courts have ruled against Republican-backed voting restrictions in 5 states, Ari informs us. It's not just North Carolina and Wisconsin. There's more. In the past 10 days, courts have issued 6 major decisions against Republican-backed voting restrictions in 5 different states. On Friday, an array of new voting restrictions was struck down in North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Kansas. This followed rulings the previous week softening voter ID laws in Texas and Wisconsin and striking down Michigan's ban on straight ticket voting. When you include a court decision in Ohio from May reinstating a week of early voting and same-day registration, anti-voting laws in 6 states have been blocked so far in 2016. Here are the recent decisions. In North Carolina, the 4th Circuit struck down the state's voter ID law and reinstated a week of early voting, same-day voter registration, out-of-precinct voting, and pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. In Wisconsin, a federal district court overturned harsh residency requirements and restrictions on early voting and casting absentee ballots and said the state must accept student IDs to vote. A week earlier, another federal court said that those who are unable to obtain a voter ID could instead vote by signing an affidavit. In Kansas, a federal district court ruled that the state's burdensome proof of citizenship law for voter registration couldn't prevent 17,500 people from voting in federal elections. Chris Kobach's work at stake there. In Texas, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 5th Circuit ruled against the state's strict voter ID law, which it said, and again, I skipped over the important part that I was emphasizing in the earlier ones. Texas, 5th Circuit. So we have 4th Circuit. That's why the North Carolina one, I think, got the most attention. Well, in addition to the extraordinary language they used, it was the fact that it was the circuit court. In Wisconsin, district court, one level below, the lowest federal courts. In Kansas, similarly, federal district court. In Texas, 5th Circuit. the step up intermediate between the district courts and the Supreme Court lie those districts, right? And in Texas, the Fifth Circuit ruled against the state's strict voter ID law, which it said had a discriminatory effect on minorities' voting rights. Like in Wisconsin, the court said those without strict ID needed to be able to vote. In Michigan, a federal court, and I guess we're talking about district court again, overturned the state's ban on straight ticket voting, which it said would lead to longer lines at the polls and disproportionately harm African American voters. In other words, one lever. I just want to vote for all the Democrats or all the Republicans or all the Greens for that matter. I just pull that lever and I'm done, and I'm that much faster in the voting booth or whatever it is that they give you these days to vote in Michigan. And that's a little more, well, okay. I mean, I'm all right with it, but that seems like a more tenuous claim. But okay, I'll take it. In North Carolina, I'm sure it's faster, but I don't know by that much. Anyway, in North Carolina, the court that we were talking about there, of course, was Fourth Circuit. The court said Republicans targeted black voters with almost surgical precision, and the evidence was as close to a smoking gun as we're likely to see in modern times. Hours later, just hours later, in Wisconsin, federal district court used almost exactly the same language, writing that the state eliminated early voting hours on nights and weekends to suppress the reliably Democratic vote of Milwaukee's African Americans. And I'm sure it was not a case of reading the decision and then changing the language. These things are written well in advance. And without having seen, there's no reason in the world why the federal district courts in Wisconsin would have had an early view of what the Fourth Circuit was working on. It's just happens to be true and obvious in both places and probably everywhere else as well. Judge James Peterson said the Wisconsin experience demonstrates that a preoccupation with mostly phantom election fraud leads to real incidents of disenfranchisement, which undermine rather than enhance confidence in elections, particularly in minority communities. Another excellent point. White communities, well, we think, white Republican communities, we think that confidence in elections is lost because they're subject to so much fraud. Well, the objective problem with that is there isn't so much fraud. In fact, there's none. So you're wrong about that. Whereas on the other hand, in African American communities, there is very little confidence in elections because they know, each one of them, 10 people who were denied the right to vote based on nothing. That's going to undermine confidence in elections, and it's real. So we're going to go because liberalism with the real rather than the imagined. Is this a liberal court? Yes. Is it a liberal court because it decided in favor of Democrats? No. It's a liberal court because it decided in favor of objective truth versus phantom fantasy. That's not even, I don't think, are they derived from the same root? I don't know. If not, they ought to have been. Why PH for one and F for the other? I don't know. That's English for you. In 2012, 10 major voting restrictions were blocked in court before the election, eliminating major impediments to the ballot box that millions of voters faced. We could be seeing a similar trend in 2016, which I think would be a very crushing blow to conservatives who are constantly griping that their elected officials can never get anything done. The ones who always say, they always promise, and then they can't do it. I know that they were disappointed in 2012, but they were sure they had it locked in for 2016. Then I don't know whether that had anything to do with their then going and nominating Trump, but hooray, it's not locked in. We could be seeing a similar trend in 2016. The recent decisions show that courts understand that these laws are designed to and have the effect of suppressing minority participation. Says Dale Ho, director of ACLU's Voting Rights Project, it feels like momentum is still on our side. However, 17 states still have new voting restrictions in place for the first time this year. And this is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, making it the first election in 50 years without the full protections of that law. Felon disenfranchisement laws have been upheld in Iowa and Virginia, very famously, I think, in Virginia. New voter ID laws have been upheld in Virginia and softened but not eliminated in Texas and Wisconsin. Ohio and Georgia are purging eligible voters from the rolls. In Georgia, black voters are being systematically targeted by police and GOP election officials, the New York Times reported. Thanks, Von Spakovsky, for that one. Polling place closures and restrictions on absentee ballots are being challenged in Arizona. I'm still very worried, Dale Ho says. There are still a lot of very suppressive laws on the books. With that in mind, I thought we might then look at this piece in Slate, in case you were wondering exactly why this was happening in the various states. Voting rights on the march. This one sold under the bill on Twitter of why courts are striking down voting rights restrictions right now in state after state. What brought this on? What are they doing? Why is it happening? Mark Joseph Stern on this one. Subtitle tells part of the story. Lower courts are emboldened by a 4-4 split and the Supreme Court's abortion ruling to strike down specious voting laws. How so? If there's a lesson in July's voting rights revolution, interesting choice of words, 6 rulings in 2 weeks that invalidated key provisions of 5 states' restrictive voting laws, it is this. The judges are fed up. They are fed up with being treated like dolts by Republican legislators who lie through their teeth about the intent of draconian voting restrictions. They are fed up with brazen efforts to diminish minorities' voting power by targeting and eliminating their preferred voting methods. And most of all, they are fed up with the pretext, the shameless insistence by Republican legislators that these explicitly partisan, outwardly race-based voting laws serve any purpose other than helping Republican legislators entrench their own political power. For years, judges across the country have gritted their teeth and bought into these flagrant fictions. The explosion of rulings vindicating voting rights last month, however, sent a stark message to legislators in Wisconsin, Texas, North Carolina, Michigan, Kansas, and beyond. We are done pretending to believe your bunk. And, while the judges clearly took their cue from the Supreme Court, the decision that appears to have freed them from accepting legislative lies doesn't deal with voting rights at all. It is, rather, Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt, an interesting theory. It's an abortion case that is really also about the judiciary's responsibility to reject legislators' fraudulent pretenses when a state curbs constitutional rights. Whole Woman's Health involved 2 abortion restrictions passed by the Texas legislature under the justification of protecting women's health. At trial, Texas could present no evidence that its new regulations made abortion safer, as its boosters claimed. Instead, the record suggested that the law's true purpose was to shut down as many clinics as possible. It was a gimmitarian movement. I don't care. I love the Constitution, except if it gets in the way of getting what I want, which is eliminating abortion. So we'll do what can we do to eliminate abortion? Well, how about we just eliminate it? Well, but we'll need, under strict scrutiny, to show that we weren't just targeting it because we hate it. How about if we go to court and say it was for a bunch of other reasons? Well, will you be able to prove it? No. But how about if we do it anyway? Okay. Well, the answer is, in a real court, and thank God they found one, the court says, when we said you got to prove things under strict scrutiny, we meant it, and you didn't, and you thought we would excuse it because you thought we were gimmitarians, and as it turns out, you drew a panel that wasn't. All right. So there we are. At trial, Texas couldn't make any proof that they had any other purpose than to shut down as many clinics as possible, but Texas argued that none of this mattered. Courts, the state insisted, must simply accept the validity of a legislature's factual assertions. And they might have to if there's not a strict scrutiny test necessarily, but that has yet to be tested. I don't know how expansive they'll be in applying this new test. But that's what the state said. The state said, doesn't matter if it's not true. If elected legislators say it's true, then it is true. And that's interesting because that's not a totally foreign concept even in American governance, although we usually leave that sort of final say to the Supreme Court. It's as disturbing as it is when you see it displayed by legislators, of course, but it's has been far better justified over time in the American system than simply accepting the word of legislators, particularly part-time legislators and part-time partisan legislators at that. Although we're quickly learning that though they're full-timers and supposedly learned in the law, there are, of course, judges and justices as partisan as any part-time legislator ever was. Anyway, so that was the argument Texas was making, that it doesn't matter. The courts have to simply accept the validity of a legislature's factual assertions, that they have no business examining the record for evidence of that the legislature is telling the truth. That is some pitch. The Supreme Court kicked this argument to the curb. When a state infringes upon a constitutional right, the court declared, the federal judiciary isn't obliged to swallow a mendacious legislature's transparent codswallop. My goodness, mendacious codswallop. Help. Texas's law marked an obvious attempt to curb women's reproductive liberty under the painfully flimsy pretext of protecting their health. Federal courts, Justice Stephen Breyer wrote for the majority, should interrogate the true intentions and effects of laws that seem suspiciously eager to trammel constitutional rights. And if they don't, what the hell do we really even have a Supreme Court for? In other words, if a state legislature can be the final word on whether or not something passes constitutional muster because they say it is, then there's no reason to have courts. It's a problem. You're eliminating Article 3. And worse for you, you're asking Article 3 to decide whether it wants to be complicit in its own erasure. It doesn't. So you lose. Good. Whole woman's health first cropped up in U.S. District Judge Lynn Edelman's decision blocking Wisconsin from denying the right to vote to residents, vote now, who can't produce the proper ID. As soon as Republicans took over every branch of the Wisconsin state government, they pushed through an omnibus voting law that restricted voting rights in almost every way imaginable. The state argued that the voter ID portion of the bill was necessary to prevent voter fraud. Everyone knows that that was their rationale, right? But everyone now, anyway, by now, we all know certainly that there just isn't any voter fraud of the type they're describing going on. So do the courts have to sit there and take it? Well, it certainly would be a problem if it did happen, and you don't want it to start happening. But then again, strict scrutiny. You know, you've got a pretty, although you don't have an explicit constitutional right to your vote yet, and we still have people who argue about that one. Certainly depriving you of that right, I think almost anybody would say, well, okay, there ought to be some strict scrutiny about that one. How strict? Well, this strict. Strict enough such that if the problem doesn't exist, but you say you need to restrict people's access to the franchise to prevent it from ever coming into existence, when it really doesn't exist, and by the way, where it does exist, you're doing nothing to help, that's an easy call. The court says, yeah, that doesn't really pass our strict scrutiny test. We're not going to do it. But interesting of Judge Edelman to pick up on this one so quickly and put it to good use, too. We'll see whether other circuit courts later on see things her way. As soon as Republicans, though, we learned, right, took over Wisconsin, they tried everything they could to restrict voting. The state argued that the voter ID portion of the bill was necessary to prevent voter fraud. It further insisted that anybody who wanted an ID could get one for free at a Wisconsin DMV within 6 days, which, by the way, isn't a particularly strong protection against voter fraud. Anybody who wants to commit voter fraud and has 6 days, I guess, could go and do that, except that they can't and never could, because even when it was easier to get even when it was, as they pointed out, on the pro-restriction side, so easy to get voter ID after all, they could go and commit all this fraud, but they never did. Nobody ever bothered for some weird reason. Anyway, Judge Edelman, of course, found this all to be, in the words of the article itself, utter twaddle. Boy, does he love these kinds of words. Well, mendacious twaddle, in fact. First of all, Wisconsin could demonstrate virtually no evidence of voter fraud. It certainly couldn't find enough evidence to justify the outrageously burdensome process the state created for obtaining an ID. And even if you don't believe it was particularly burdensome, there's no reason, absent the fraud, the existence of any of it, to have any burden in place for getting an ID, or any burden in place for casting a ballot. So even if you increase it by a tiny fraction, it's still too much under strict scrutiny. Anyway, not enough evidence for the court, anyhow, to justify the outrageously burdensome process the state had created for obtaining an ID, a process that effectively disenfranchised thousands of mostly minority voters. And its assertion that any resident could get an ID within 6 days also was proved to be a pure falsehood. That's another problem. The Supreme Court recently reiterated that where a state law burdens a constitutional right, the state must produce evidence supporting its claim that the burden is necessary to further the state's claimed interests, Edelman concluded, citing Whole Woman's Health. Again, a liberal concept, not in the sense in which conservatives try to define what liberalism is, but in the classically liberal sense. Why did the Supreme Court say that a state law that burdens a constitutional right has to produce evidence supporting its claim that the burden is necessary? Because that's logic. And that's what liberalism likes to base itself on. Why do you have this law? Why do small government conservatives who feel that the least government is the best government, based on that, let's say we open our minds and accept your premise, that state which governs least governs best, or whatever, however the old phrasing used to go, right? Why a new law? What's the and aren't they all about this these days in the Republican Congress? Right? If you're going to propose, even if you're going to propose a law, you write a bill, submit it. It's got to have constitutional justification written right into it. And by the way, this has implications for that too. You can't just say, "Well, my constitutional justification for this law is it's friggin' awesome, and it protects some kind of crap or whatever. Things that we're supposed to do in the Constitution, it does it. You can't just fake it." So you're going to propose a new law that has to do with votes and the right to vote. Why? I mean, that's it. That's all there is. That's the basic issue right here in this little tiny paragraph. You want a new law that's going to make it more difficult for even one person to vote. Why do you want it? Because? Well, no, that's not going to pass muster. You got to give me something better. That's the basic premise here. If you want this additional piece of crap, or even an awesome law, you want it on the books, why? If your answer is, I don't know exactly, but maybe health? Or maybe voter fraud thing? Looking for signs of approval on the judge's face. It's an eyebrow lift or anything. Now, that's not really going to do it. Under your own test here. We just can't add this crap to the books because you say you want it. Particularly if we also find your notes that say, this is really going to make it tough for black people to vote, and that's awesome because I'm a Republican and I hate them. Okay, that's going to be a no. Now, after Judge Edelman did this in Wisconsin, just a week later, another U.S. District Judge in Wisconsin, James D. Peterson, went farther than Edelman, calling out the legislature for its preoccupation with mostly phantom election fraud. This obsession, Peterson wrote, leads to real incidents of disenfranchisement, which undermine rather than enhance confidence in elections, particularly in minority communities. Peterson slammed Wisconsin's ID acquisition process as a disaster and a wretched failure that has disenfranchised a number of citizens who are unquestionably qualified to vote, and these disenfranchised citizens are overwhelmingly African American and Latino. He also struck down portions of the Wisconsin law that slashed early voting and absentee voting as violations of the First, 14th, and 15th Amendments, as well as the Voting Rights Act. Most importantly of all, Peterson squarely acknowledged that the Republicans had passed the law for partisan purposes, not out of any legislative concern for the integrity of Wisconsin's elections. If Peterson scolded the Wisconsin legislature for its race-based voting restrictions, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit filleted, and roasted the North Carolina legislature for its egregiously racist voting law. The Republican-dominated legislature passed an omnibus voting measure immediately after the Supreme Court freed the state from pre-clearance. We learned this yesterday, allowing it to modify voting laws without federal approval. As the Fourth Circuit explained, Republican legislators then promptly requested data on the use by race of a number of voting practices. Then, using this racial breakdown of voting practices, the state proceeded to restrict every voting method preferred by minorities. Like Wisconsin, North Carolina insisted that its regulations were necessary to prevent voter fraud. Not so, the Fourth Circuit held. These seemingly irrational restrictions, the court explained, appeared to be unrelated to the goal of combating fraud. The court excoriated North Carolina's justifications for the laws as post hoc rationalizations and solutions in search of a problem. Over and over again, the court found the state's explanations for its mass disenfranchisement of black voters were irrational, illogical, dishonest, and pathetic. That's a liberal analysis. You don't even really need to get to the dishonest and pathetic part. But irrational, illogical, not going to fly. Can't have them as laws. Why? Classical liberalism. You mean partisanship? No. I mean logic. Reality. Does this work? Does this exist? Would this stop it if it did? No? Then no law. Actually, classical liberalism because logic, and classical conservatism because why? You know what? What do they usually say when the issue's guns? We don't need new laws, just enforce the ones already on the books. When issues voter fraud, it's like, we got 75,000 laws, quickly, and make sure they're discriminatory, too. The Fifth Circuit was similarly skeptical of the intent behind Texas's severe voter ID law, which infamously deemed concealed handgun licenses as valid identification, speaking of guns, but rejected student IDs from state schools. And again, that's an even better point. Student IDs, yeah, probably should accept them. Most schools probably pretty restrictive in how they issue them, particularly these days since they also serve as a sort of security pass. In some cases can literally open doors to locked school buildings if you have a code that can be scanned on it. But this is basically their first line security measure. People are pretty picky about these things these days. In the old days, student ID was something you just kind of slapped together, perhaps. Maybe it had a photo, maybe it even didn't. But like most IDs, they've gotten a little bit stricter with these things. And of course, if they're state schools, well then, by God, the legislature can, if they wish, impose all sorts of restrictions and requirements on how those IDs are issued and what's on them. And if you need to hammer them in line with directly state issued or DMV issued or whatever you call it in your state, issued IDs, then just do it. Why rule out student IDs? Well, because you'd want to rule out students. And that doesn't pass muster under strict scrutiny. Sorry. How so and in what terms? Well, in her majority opinion, George W. Bush appointee Judge Katharina Hayes found that the law had, remember this is in Texas, an illegally discriminatory impact on minorities under the Voting Rights Act. Hayes also wrote that there may be evidence to support a finding that the cloak of ballot integrity could be hiding a more invidious purpose. That is, outright racism. Meanwhile, of course, Texas could produce virtually no evidence that in-person voter fraud really occurs. And in a concurring opinion, two judges cited Whole Woman's Health as proof that the courts must not ignore evidence of whether a specific law advances a legitimate interest or imposes needless burdens, no matter what the legislature claims. No judge, though, has castigated phony justifications for voting restrictions as acidly as U.S. District Judge Gershwin A. Drain. Is that a real name? Wow. As acidly as Judge Drain did in striking down Michigan's recent ban on straight party voting. The ban, spearheaded by Republicans, who you would think would also, benefit from people just pulling that Republican lever, but who cares? There's no waiting in line issue in Republican precincts, right? The ban, spearheaded by Republicans, had a disproportionate impact on black voters and significantly increased wait times and lines at polls in black communities, among other things that probably purposefully increased wait times, but that must have been a useful one. The state had argued that the prohibition was necessary to preserve the purity of elections. Purity. To guard against abuses of the elective franchise and to ensure that voters are truly engaged in the electoral process. Like literacy tests. I'm not really sure you're smart enough to cast those votes, apparently is the question. But these interests are tenuous at best, Drain wrote in fiery terms. Here are those terms. Michigan has not demonstrated how straight party voting has damaged or could possibly damage the purity of the election process. And that's a tough sell to make. I consider the number of people who are saying, I think he's a danger to our country, the American way of life, and possibly the existence of the human race in the world, but he is the Republican, so I'm voting for him. That's less dangerous somehow than, you know what, I think I actually do like all the Democrats and none of the Republicans on this ticket. There's nothing impure or disengaged about choosing to vote for every candidate affiliated with, for example, the Republican Party. Because remember, that's a possibility too. A voter may base their vote on any criteria he or she wishes, including party affiliation. That latitude we still allow to individual voters. But of course, they're not legislating. Drain also noted that there is nothing in the record to suggest that changing the ballot form will encourage voters to become political science scholars before voting, quipping that the ban itself is thus disengaged from its own justifications. Not every judge to crush a voting restriction this July cited whole woman's health, but the spirit of the case, its skeptical view of legislative findings seemingly unmoored from reality, lingers behind every decision. Why? Not, again, like I said, it's not all based on whole woman's health. It's that was inherently in judges' minds anyway because liberalism and because, in no small part, conservatism as well. If you're going to have a new law, it's got to have a damn reason. And if you're going to have a reason for a law, it's got to be connected to what you say the reason is. Does it fix the problem? If it in fact has nothing to do with the problem, this is not a law we need, not a law we want, and not one that's going to pass muster. The strict scrutiny test is a lot older than whole woman's health. It's just the latest incarnation of it. So too does the Supreme Court's current deadlock, a 4-4 ideological split that incentivizes pro-voter decisions, at least among circuit courts. The conservatives on the Supreme Court may hate these rulings, but they likely can't pick up a fifth vote to reverse them. Frozen in a stalemate, the justices have little reason even to hear these cases in the first place, so lower courts are emboldened to issue rulings they know won't be overturned and won't be criticized from above in any way either. They'll have this is a great opportunity for ambitious and aspiring circuit court judges to say, play Supreme Court here. Basically what we say is gonna stand, because even if the court decides they've got to take it up, they're unlikely to be able to find a way to do anything about it, and our ruling will stand. Meanwhile, the lower court judges are getting restless and irritated. The breathtakingly shoddy justifications for these voting restrictions offend their intelligence and judicial sensibilities. This entire charade, the years-long effort to concoct a non-existent voter fraud problem and address it, that should be in probably scare quotes, by disenfranchising minority voters, seems to be crumbling under judicial scrutiny. Republicans have long assumed that with the guidance of a conservative Supreme Court, the federal judiciary would rubber stamp their assault on voting rights, and they were almost correct. Then Scalia died. In July 2016, or rather July of 2016, marked the month when the courts took off their blinders and began to fight back. February 2016, of course, marks the month when they realized they could do that. It just took to July to get around to getting it done. All right, interesting, probably pretty good, and probably the reason why this whole piece is illustrated in one photo here, and it's a picture of Justice Scalia, who's dead. That's some subtext for you. All right. By the way, speaking of all this stuff, let's spend a minute here correcting the record a little bit and adding to yesterday's record on this stuff too. I was sort of speaking off the cuff and without, I guess I was going to say without a factual record like Wikipedia, if it can be considered a factual record, in front of me. But one, I recall that yesterday I was scanning my brain, reaching for the name that I always associated with Hans von Spakovsky, who let's open up his Wikipedia profile now, and then I was reminded, and I was reminded on Twitter yesterday, and I had already looked it up as well, but we might as well get that name. Remember yesterday I was reaching for what was that BS name? That was so funny that that's his initials, but it's Bradley Schlossman, which is an amazingly, remarkably easy name to ridicule. But he's the guy that whose name I was reaching for. And as it turns out, anyway, von Spakovsky, I kept mentioning his time at the Justice Department, but I recall that his time at the Justice Department was actually relatively limited, and then they attempted to put him into another role at the DOJ, and they didn't. I don't think they were able to make it happen in the Senate, and so they parked him at the FEC, I guess, as the next best possibility. But Schlossman, I think, was much more instrumental in terms of the embedding of the policy of simply rubber stamping voting restrictions and new redistricting plans under the pre-clearance program, to simply, turn that into a whitewash program. Well, we'll pre-clear anything so that it can survive challenges in court. And that's probably the beginning of where a lot of these district court and circuit court judges began taking personal offense too. That's actually considerably more difficult for them to deal with than simply whitewashing it at the legislative level by saying, well, this is our purpose, even though we have no proof of it. But just by way of filling in the background, Van Spakovsky was, in fact, at the Justice Department for a while. I can give you a little bit of the guy's background. I know his name popped up again when I was talking about Georgia earlier. He's actually from Alabama. But just by way of background, if you were wondering about that, Hans von Spakovsky of Alabama, really? Van Spakovsky, yes, originally from Huntsville, a second-generation American whose parents immigrated to the United States in 1951 after meeting in a refugee camp as displaced persons at the end of World War II, which would, of course, make them, as you might have guessed, Germanic. Let's see. He, a member of the Georgia and Tennessee bars. Before entering politics, he worked as a government affairs consultant in a corporate legal department and in private practice. This according to Wikipedia, of course. Van Spakovsky served as Republican Party chairman in Fulton County, Georgia, and as a Republican appointee to the Fulton County Registration and Election Board, where he championed strict voter identification laws. Van Spakovsky became a member of the Voting Integrity Project, which also ought to be in scare quotes, which investigated alleged voter fraud across the United States, I guess to no end, as well as a member of the politically conservative Federalist Society. For those of you keeping score at home, he worked as a lawyer for George W. Bush's team during the Florida recount in 2000, and after Bush's election quote-unquote victory, von Spakovsky was appointed to the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. While he was there, he was hired to the Justice Department as an expert on elections. Interesting, right? Isn't that amazing? The DOJ hired him as an expert on elections. He was the guy that said all this voter fraud was going on, and so therefore this new spate of laws was necessary and justified. And about, 16 years later, we find out exactly how wrong he was. So wrong, in fact, that there are judges across the United States practically bursting into flames in their anger at what he hath wrought. Anyway, he was a supposed expert on elections, but he had everything backwards and upside down, and for partisan reasons and racist reasons at that. And he advocated for what he described as the application of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in a race-neutral manner. He thought he had it won, I guess, in 2013, but guess what happened? And the answer is Scalia died, and justice eventually prevailed. Von Spakovsky was also tasked with guiding the Bush administration's role on passing legislation that became known as the Help America Vote Act. Thanks for helping. Von Spakovsky's tenure at the Justice Department was marked by a focus on voter eligibility and voter fraud. In 2005, he led the department's approval of a controversial Georgia law requiring voters to produce photo ID. Despite strong objections from Justice Department staff, who were really interested in doing things according to the books, their objection that the law would disproportionately harm and disenfranchise African American voters. 10 years we've been fighting this. Von Spakovsky subsequently acknowledged that he had written a law review article supporting such photo ID laws under the pseudonym Publius, because he was so proud of it, prompting concerns that he should have recused himself from the Justice Department decision. But he didn't. Like Scalia, who died. And death is eventually coming for von Spakovsky as well. We just don't know when. The Georgia law was subsequently overturned by a federal judge who compared it to a Jim Crow-era poll tax. That created a problem, of course, for them, and they needed to find a way to undo the judge's undoing of their work. During von Spakovsky's tenure, more than half of the career Justice Department staff left the voting section in protest. Von Spakovsky argued against the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act in 2006, but the reauthorization overwhelmingly passed Congress and was signed into law by the Bush administration. Oops. Von Spakovsky also served on the Board of Advisors of the Election Assistance Commission, a government commission created by the Help America Vote Act of 2002. He clashed with the commission head, Paul DeGregorio. Several individuals with knowledge of the situation, speaking anonymously to McClatchy newspapers, alleged that DeGregorio had resisted an overtly partisan agenda, and his removal was therefore engineered by von Spakovsky. How nice. He's a pleasant fellow. Okay. Well, by the way, let me speak to this for a minute. More than half the career Justice Department staff left the voting section in protest over, I understand the protest. I wonder whether in hindsight they might better have said, you know what, no, we're not, this should we leave the job because of sexual harassment? No, we should stay and fight. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. And thankless job, for sure, and a place where they can make life miserable for you very, very quickly. I can't really pretend to pass judgment on it. I wonder whether it might have come out differently, and had they stayed, but I could not tell you, certainly couldn't tell you for sure. I can't even really guess. What would I do in the same situation? But I'm just wondering. That's all. They may be entirely right. Later, he was, I said, parked at the Federal Election Commission. He received a recess appointment, by the way, to the FEC in January of 2006. His confirmation hearings were contentious as Democratic senators criticized his Justice Department tenure and accused him of partisanship, which in fact Paul DeGregorio had done, and half the career staff at the voting section had done the same. A group of career Justice Department staff, those who had probably resigned, plus maybe some that were still there, wrote a letter to the Senate arguing that von Spakovsky's appointment, and opposing it rather, saying he, quote, played a major role in the implementation of practices which injected partisan political factors into decision-making on enforcement matters and into the hiring process. And included repeated efforts to intimidate career staff. Here, the larger overarching problem with the Bush Department of Justice comes into focus. The Monica Goodlings and others who were monkeying not only with the U.S. Attorney's section, but with the voting rights section as well. In response to questioning from the Senate, von Spakovsky repeatedly asserted that he could not remember or recall his involvement in various controversial Justice Department decisions, drawing comparisons to the testimony of former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and pretty much everybody else from the Republican Party who's ever been caught dead to rights. Faced with mounting opposition, von Spakovsky ultimately withdrew from the FEC confirmation process. He subsequently assumed a position with the Heritage Foundation, I guess the next best thing, a politically conservative think tank, in case you didn't know what that was. Von Spakovsky claimed that about 1,400 votes, 4 times the margin of victory, were cast by ineligible prisoners in the 2008 Minnesota race for the U.S. Senate, which was won by Al Franken, and the seat which is still held by Mr. Franken as well. By the way, he has moved on from there. He now lives in Fairfax County, Virginia, and he was chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Elections in 2012. Exactly where you want to park this guy. Guy's got a real major hang-up with, I guess, black people, basically. And basically the living embodiment of everything that was rejected in 5 states, 6 if you count since May, in all of these voting rights cases. This has been his life's work. And federal judges everywhere think it's absurd and disgusting. How'd you like to live with that? How'd you like to live with the name Bradley Schlossman? Let's go over to Bradley Joe. Bradley Joseph Schlossman, an attorney who served as acting head of the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice under Alberto Gonzales, member of the Republican Party. Obviously, Schlossman was appointed by Gonzales as the interim U.S. Attorney. What? U.S. Attorney? How did they get in the picture? For the Western District of Missouri, replacing Todd Graves, and he assumed that office in March of 2006. In April 2007, Schlossman left the U.S. Attorney position, a stepping stone as it was, to work at the Executive Office for United States Attorneys, and you know what they did there. Schlossman and his office came under review by congressional and Senate investigators regarding the dismissal of U.S. attorneys and alleged inappropriate politicization of the Civil Rights Division. The Department of Justice, Inspector General, and the Office of Professional Responsibility alleged that Schlossman had violated the law and made false statements to Congress about his hiring decisions, while Schlossman testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee that his personnel decisions were not based on party affiliation. The report cited emails and other communications in which Schlossman discussed hiring right-thinking Americans and ridding the Civil Rights Division of pinkos, commies, and attorneys perceived to be unacceptably liberal. Those are direct quotes, by the way, pinkos and commies. He really used those terms in 2000-something. Federal prosecutors, however, declined to file charges of criminal perjury against Schlossman, drawing criticism from Senate Democrats. Schlossman resigned from the Department of Justice on August 17, 2007. Who was president back then? And accepted a position with the Hinkle Law Firm in Wichita, Kansas. Yeah. So interesting that it's weird, right? The guy is lying about everything and is caught dead to rights in emails that they somehow didn't delete or lose or fail to recall or whatever, ridding the Civil Rights Division of pinkos, commies, and attorneys deemed to be unacceptably liberal. And remember, once again, the definition of liberal, people who apply logic and find the best solution to these things. But he meant liberal in the social sense, I'm sure. Amazingly, federal prosecutors, under the direction of the very same Department of Justice that he was befouling from inside, declined to file any charges. That is odd. Well, I guess if you get to make the decisions over whether or not you're going to prosecute your own people for executing your own agenda, even when caught dead to rights, it's a pretty easy decision. That's why they probably should have held him in inherent contempt of Congress for what he did and take the DOJ out of the picture entirely. It would be a little bit like having the immediate equivalent of an independent prosecutor for you. I guess you need to have that. What do you do if you find people inside the Department of Justice behind this kind of wrongdoing? You would think you would want an independent counsel, but they can't be under the control of the Department of Justice or really even the executive that runs it. Kind of really should be happening in a different branch. Anyway, so that's kind of like where he came from and what his background was. Let's we'll talk about a couple of the cases that he took up while he was there and that involved him. The Georgia voter ID law in 2005, remember this one that we mentioned under the discussion of Van Spakovsky. 2005, Georgia passed a controversial voter ID law that required all voters to show photo ID at the polls, eliminated the previously accepted forms of voter ID, including Social Security cards, birth certificates, utility bills, as required by the Voting Rights Act. Georgia and other states with a history of voter discrimination, this is all about pre-clearance, you remember that, are required to show that law changes will not have a discriminatory impact on minority voters, and to get approval of the Department of Justice under the 1965 Voting Rights Act. According to rumors reported in the press, all of the staff of the Civil Rights Division of DOJ, save one, recommended against the new law's approval. But Schlossman and other political appointees overruled the staff and approved it. The law was initially held unconstitutional as against the Georgia state constitution, but that ruling was reversed by a unanimous decision of the Georgia Supreme Court. In federal court, U.S. District Judge Harold L. Murphy issued an injunction against the law, insulting everyone's intelligence. Once again, he says this law did, and he enjoins the law, holding that it was constitutionally suspect, but declining to consider whether it offended the Voting Rights Act. Subsequent to the federal court decision, Schlossman wrote an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution defending the Department of Justice's decision to pre-clear the voter ID law under the Voting Rights Act. Although the Justice Department's actions were heavily criticized by liberal groups, no court has ever held that the Georgia ID law runs afoul of the Voting Rights Act, the only statutory provision considered by the DOJ in issuing its approval of the law. In fact, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit upheld the law against all constitutional challenges. I wonder if they'll ever revisit that. Texas redistricting. Remember this one? In 2003, Tom DeLay spearheaded a major redistricting plan for the state of Texas. Justice Department lawyers wrote a memo opposing the plan, concluding that it violated the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The memo was endorsed unanimously by lawyers and analysts from the department's voting section. Nevertheless, Schlossman and other political appointees overruled the lawyers' objections and approved DeLay's plan. In League of United Latin American Citizens v. Perry, remember Perry? The Supreme Court issued a complex 100-plus page opinion concluding that all but one of the 32 districts in the Texas redistricting plan satisfied the requirements of the Voting Rights Act. In 2005, while Schlossman was serving in the Civil Rights Division, the DOJ filed a lawsuit against Missouri accusing the state of failing to make a reasonable effort to eliminate ineligible people from voter rolls and improperly removing certain voters from the voter rolls prematurely. Although the then U.S. Attorney for Missouri, Todd Graves, whom Schlossman later succeeded after Graves' forced resignation, claims to have refused to sign off on the lawsuit, the complaint filed in the case was signed by both Graves and an assistant U.S. attorney from his office, in addition to Schlossman and Assistant Attorney General Juan J. Kim. Juan, W-A-N, not J-U-A-N. Juan J. Kim. On April 13th, 2007, a federal district judge dismissed the lawsuit, asserting that the Secretary of State couldn't police local registration rolls. The Justice Department appealed that ruling, however, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit later reversed the district court's decision. In March 2009, after a new political leadership had been installed at the Department of Justice in the wake of the presidential election, the Justice Department asked the judge a judge to dismiss the lawsuit, essentially ending the case and dropping all charges. Well, it has been an interesting time inside government for these two fellows. Interesting to see that, well, I guess that's the answer, is it takes about 10 years to get around to finding the opportunity to root this kind of stuff out of the system the best you can. And you can see how in the interim, in case you had any doubts about the importance of courts and the importance of being able to fill those slots in the federal judiciary, I mean, just take a look at the fact that a lot of federal courts, I mean, I guess the liberals the real liberals and those appointed by Democrats who were already or were still sitting on those courts, and those who have gone on to sit on those courts in the years since the Bush administration and under the Obama administration, people have been waiting 10 years for the opportunity to demonstrate their offense in all of this and try and set things right. So, the Supreme Court, extraordinarily important as the final word in all of this. But the federal judiciary up and down the line, extraordinarily important in even, the day-to-day fight to even allow everyday citizens to have a say in who gets to appoint the judges who decide whether or not they get to have a say. This really is pretty fundamental to everything. But I'm sure Jill Stein will do great by your vote. Anyway, there's plenty more that we can get to, but we are running up against our usual time restrictions. I thought that was still time well spent, though, providing additional background and context for the big North Carolina stories. Let's mention a few other things and see if we can't squeeze a few more in. Let's see. That's interesting, but relatively unimportant, I guess. Just for fun, we'll save it and therefore eliminate some unnecessary links from our afternoon podcast recap. But we're going to have to get back to the issue of Donald Trump, after all, eventually. Let's see. Let me throw this in here. Although I said I wanted to consider, pardon me, the possibility of being done forever with analyzing the problems either at the convention or even pre- and post-convention with Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders delegates and supporters. But I want to throw this one out here just by way of, I hope, a wrap-up. There's actually a lot to discuss, but I wanted to bring your attention to this, and I'm sure there are countervailing examples out there, but I haven't seen them published, and maybe you could bring them to my attention if we want to throw one out there for balance. Sanders delegates fault Bernie. I don't know if I would necessarily fault Bernie himself, but the organization for DNC chaos. This just brings up an interesting assertion. Supporters, this is the subhead of the Politico piece here, and it is Politico. Take it with a grain of salt. Supporters say first-time delegates didn't get enough information from the campaign about what to expect at the convention. Okay, that doesn't really fully express the point. I'll distill it down to this. There were delegates in attendance at the convention who now contend that they were there with the understanding, whoever's feet you want to lay the fault at, with the understanding that there really was an opportunity to come out of that convention nominating Bernie Sanders instead of Hillary Clinton. And that's problematic, and that may have been at the heart of the fervor with which some of them pushed back so hard. Some of them would doubtless have pushed back just as hard, even if they had a complete and thorough and correct understanding of the dynamics, and that's okay. But to the extent that there were people who thought, yeah, it's not actually true that Hillary Clinton has this thing locked up, and I don't know whether they were speaking metaphorically like, well, the superdelegates haven't voted yet, and they bought into that line, or whether they really just came away with the understanding that It's an open contest. A handful of Bernie Sanders delegates, according to Tyler Pager and Dan Spinelli at Politico, are placing part of the blame for Monday night's revolt anyway on the Vermont senator, saying his campaign did not properly communicate with the legions of politically inexperienced delegates who went into the convention with unrealistic expectations. That's just one of the consequences of opening the process. You can deal with it better or worse, but I would say it's not a reason to not send inexperienced delegates in the future. You just send educated but inexperienced delegates. That's okay. The first night of the Democratic National Convention was a raucous scene in which boos overwhelmed speakers at seemingly every mention of Hillary Clinton's name, creating the image of a party in chaos. The discord was partially fueled by a leak of a trove of emails, as you know, hacked out of the DNC. But it was also the result of some dumbfounded delegates who went into the convention thinking Clinton didn't have the nomination sewn up and that there was still a path for Sanders. The first day proved to be a rude reality check. The Sanders campaign was doing an excellent job on negotiating on the platform and the shape of the convention, but it could have been a lot better in preparing the delegates, said Daranka Larimore Hall, a Sanders delegate from California. People had all kinds of misunderstandings of what to expect at the convention. It's troublesome, and I guess the key part down here begins with Arshad Hassan, another Sanders delegate from Vermont, and I think somebody considerably more politically experienced than some of the delegates. He said he was surprised to encounter other delegates on the first day of the convention. The first day of the convention, who believed neither candidate had yet won the votes necessary to win the nomination. He said delegates' refusal to accept the fact that Clinton captured the nomination also created problems during Vermont's selection of at-large delegates to the convention. When they did this in-state, he said some delegates there were creating a litmus test to select only delegates, and this is okay, but only delegates whom they could trust to vote for Sanders during every round of voting at the convention, even though Hassan knew there would be only one round of voting. Very interesting, and it's interesting that they focused more on that than on focusing on getting people onto the party platform and rules committees, et cetera, and to really understand what they were going to Philadelphia to do. Unfortunate. I don't know if that really necessarily would have changed things. There certainly would have been protests anyway. There were plenty of people who understood exactly what was going on and wanted to protest nonetheless. I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration on our ongoing political science investigation. But what about what's coming next on Netroots Radio? Because, of course, it's the after show, and they pick up all the slack that we miss on this show. Today, U.S. mosquitoes are now spreading Zika, and the GOP-controlled Congress still doesn't have a plan to stop it. The medical benefits of flossing are not scientifically proven. Oh, my God, the science is out on flossing? Wow.
From Daily Coos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, here's the big stuff. The Bank of America Merrill Lynch launched a manifesto for a new world order for portfolio protection in its fight against the looming war on inequality. Important stuff if you're extraordinarily wealthy, and if not, well, you can listen to Chris Reeves, a.k.a. Tom Servo 433, with his insider look on the DNC next.